On a bright sunny afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the streets were peaceful and calm. Birds chirped softly, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves on the trees lining the sidewalks. Most people were enjoying the warmth of the day, some chatting with neighbors or tending to their gardens. At one house a man stood beside his car, clearly in a hurry. He was known around the block for being impatient and quick to anger. His face showed frustration as he glanced at the driveway and the small dog sitting right in front of his car. The dog was gentle and calm, a little older, with soft graying fur that told stories of years spent quietly watching the world go by. The dog belonged to the neighbor across the street, a rescue who had found a safe home here. The man didn't seem to care. He wanted to leave fast, but the dog was blocking his path, sitting without moving an inch. Without warning or a second thought, the man kicked the dog hard, pushing it away from the car. The dog yelped in pain, but didn't lash out. It just whimpered and looked confused. Neighbors watching from their windows gasped in shock. Some rushed outside, disturbed by what they had just seen. But before anyone could say a word, the man slammed his car door, his face flushed with anger. He started the engine and sped off down the street, leaving a stunned and hurt dog behind. The neighborhood was buzzing with whispers and uneasy glances after the man's cruel act. People stood on their porches and gathered in small groups, talking in hushed voices about what they had just seen. Many were angry, some deeply saddened, and others simply couldn't believe someone could hurt an innocent dog like that. The little dog had done nothing wrong. It was just sitting quietly, minding its own business. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Jensen, an elderly woman who lived a few houses down, had watched everything unfold from her window. Her heart ached for the dog. Without hesitation she grabbed her phone and called the police. She knew something had to be done. This was not just a case of a bad day or a moment of frustration, it was cruelty, plain and simple. Meanwhile, the dog tried to get up but limped painfully. It was clear the kick had hurt, but the dog still wagged its tail weakly, showing its gentle nature. The vulnerability in those eyes made the neighbors' hearts break even more. Soon police officers arrived quietly, but with purpose. They walked carefully through the street, speaking to anyone who had seen the incident. Voices were shaky as witnesses told their stories. The officers took notes and promised to find the man who had caused the harm. Not long after, the man returned to the neighborhood, as if nothing had happened. He was defensive when the officers approached him, brushing off their questions and denying any serious wrongdoing. His tone was sharp, and his body language showed irritation rather than regret. One officer, calm and steady, spoke firmly to the man about the laws against animal cruelty. The officer explained that hurting an animal was not only cruel but illegal, and such actions had consequences. The man's face grew tense, the weight of those words settling in. The community watched silently, waiting to see what would happen next. The moment was thick with tension. It was clear this was more than a simple warning. It was the beginning of something bigger. The man's anger didn't hide the fact that the law was watching, and justice might be closer than he thought. The man stood there, arms crossed, still bristling with anger and impatience. He seemed sure that the officers would simply warn him and let him go. After all, he muttered under his breath, it was just a dog. But then something unexpected happened. One of the officers calmly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a warrant. The man's eyes widened as the officer unfolded it slowly and held it up where everyone nearby could see. It wasn't just a routine stop anymore. The warrant was official and clear. It was an arrest warrant for this man. The neighbors who had gathered on the sidewalks gasped and whispered among themselves, their shock growing as the story behind the warrant was explained. The officer explained that this wasn't the man's first run-in with the law over animal cruelty. Months ago he had been charged with similar offenses. He had failed to pay fines and missed court dates. There had even been warnings while he was on probation to stay away from animals and to treat them with kindness. This new incident was not just an isolated act, it was a serious violation of his probation and the law. The man's confident, angry demeanor began to crack. His face flushed red, then paled as panic started to sink in. He tried to speak quickly, denying that he had kicked the dog, saying things didn't happen the way the witnesses described. But the officers remained firm, reminding him that the warrant was backed by evidence and legal authority. Neighbors pressed closer, some holding their hands over their mouths in disbelief, others whispering to each other about the justice they were witnessing. The man's protests grew weaker as the officers read the warrant aloud. There was no escaping it. "You have the right to remain silent," one officer said softly but clearly, as he pulled out handcuffs. The man was stunned, almost frozen. The crowd watched in silence, the air thick with emotion. It was a moment of truth. No one was above the law, not even someone who had acted so cruelly. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists, and the officers gently but firmly guided him toward their car. The man's anger had turned into a quiet shame. As the police car pulled away, the neighbors exchanged looks of relief mixed with sadness. They hoped this moment would be a lesson, not just for him, but for anyone who thought hurting animals was acceptable. The quiet neighborhood had been shaken, but justice had taken its first step forward. The man who had kicked the innocent dog would face consequences, and the community could finally breathe a little easier knowing that kindness and the law had stood together. After the man was taken away by the police, the neighborhood slowly returned to its usual calm, but something had changed. The small dog, once hurt and trembling, became the center of the community's care and attention. Neighbors gathered around, bringing blankets, food, and water to help the dog heal. Mrs. Jensen, who had first called the police, gently picked up the dog and took it inside her home to make sure it was safe and comfortable. The dog's limp was still there, a reminder of the pain it had suffered, but its spirit was strong. Day by day, the dog grew stronger, wagging its tail with more energy and greeting everyone with a soft, hopeful look in its eyes. The neighbors took turns checking on the dog, sharing stories of kindness and promises that no harm would ever come its way again. This little dog became more than just a pet to them. It became a symbol of resilience and hope. It showed everyone that even when hurt, kindness and care could bring healing. Many neighbors who once barely spoke now found themselves connected through a shared love and concern for this gentle creature. The dog reminded them of the simple truth that animals deserve respect and protection, no matter how small or quiet they may be. The story spread through the neighborhood and beyond. People talked about the incident not just as a sad moment but as a powerful lesson. The man's arrest was seen as a reminder that cruelty has consequences. Justice wasn't just an idea, it was real and active, and it could arrive when it was needed most. Many felt a deep sense of relief, knowing that laws were there to protect those who could not speak for themselves. It was a moment of instant karma, where the man's harsh action was met with a swift and fair response. But more importantly, it was a chance for the community to show what truly mattered: compassion and respect for all living things. The dog's recovery was a quiet victory, proof that goodness could heal wounds and bring people together. In the days that followed, the neighborhood felt a little brighter. Children laughed as they played near the dog's favorite spot. Adults smiled when they saw the dog happily walking without a limp, and everyone carried with them a hopeful thought that change was possible, justice was real, and kindness would always find a way to shine through the darkest moments. This story, born from a painful act, ended with a powerful truth: cruelty would not be ignored, but love and care could bring hope, healing, and a better tomorrow. This story reminds us that animal cruelty is never without consequence. Hurting a helpless creature is not just wrong, it's against the law. The man who thought he could get away with kicking a small dog faced justice because someone cared enough to speak up, and because the law stood firm to protect the innocent. Kindness and respect for all living beings are what hold communities together. Every life, no matter how small, deserves to be treated with care and compassion. This is a lesson the neighborhood learned the hard way, but one they now carry in their hearts. It also shows the power each person holds. One neighbor's decision to act, to call the police, changed everything. Standing up against cruelty may feel small, but it can spark real change. When people come together to protect those who cannot protect themselves, the world becomes a better place. So, as this story comes to an end, it's worth asking, how do we treat the creatures around us? Do we choose kindness over anger, patience over impatience? Remember, small actions, like speaking up or showing care, can make a huge difference. In the end, justice was served, and a community's compassion healed a hurt dog. Let this be a gentle reminder that every act of kindness matters.